Now, to handle the form submission, we got to do two main things. We have to listen to the form submission, and we then actually have to prevent the browser default, which is that it sends a HTTP request automatically, and hence it would reload the page. We want to prevent this and instead handle the submission with JavaScript, with React. And in addition to that, we of course need to read the entered values. We need to get the actual input the user entered. Now let's start with the form submission. To listen for that submission, we can add the onSubmit prop on the form. Because by default, a submit event will be emitted if you have a button in a form and that button is clicked. And we can then catch this submit event here and run our own logic with help of that onSubmit prop. Now I will add another nested function in the new Meetup form component function, let's say the submit handler, which should be triggered when the submit event occurs by connecting function and onSubmit like this. But as I mentioned a couple of seconds ago, the default behavior of the browser would actually be that it sends a request to the server serving this page automatically. And we don't want that. We don't want that browser default. Instead, we want to prevent that default and run our own JavaScript logic. That might then still involve that we send a HTTP request later, but we want to send that request behind the scenes without reloading the page, which is what would happen if the browser does its default thing. Now, thankfully, preventing that browser default is simple. We will get an event object automatically here. Because all those built-in events like onClick, onSubmit, and all the other events to which we can listen, for all those events, React will automatically pass an event argument into the function that is executed for those events. This argument, which we can accept here as a parameter. And this event object will have a prevent default method which we can call to prevent the browser default. That's actually not even React specific. This event object and this method, that is vanilla JavaScript, which is fully supported by React. So that will prevent that browser default and will allow us to fully handle the submission with just JavaScript and React. So that's step one. Now we need to find a way of reading those entered values. For reading the entered values, we got two main ways of handling this. We can use state again and add the onChange event listener to all those inputs, which will in the end trigger a function for every keystroke, and then we can extract that value the user entered from the event object which will receive for that event and update our state for that given input with the entered value. That would allow us to keep track of what the user entered with every keystroke. But here I'm actually only interested in the user input once, when the form is submitted. And for this we can use another concept built into React, the concept of refs. Now ref stands for reference, and React simply allows us to set up references to DOM elements, so we can get direct access to DOM elements. To set up such a reference, such a connection, we first of all have to import the useRef hook from React. So just like useState, that's another built-in special function offered by React, which we can execute in our functional components. And we can execute useRef here. And with that, we create a ref object, a reference object. We can store this in a constant, and we could name it title input ref, because my first ref here should be for this title input. Now to connect this created object to this input, we add another special prop to this HTML element. Another special prop besides the key prop, which is built into React and supported on all elements out of the box. And that's the ref prop. We add the ref prop to this input, and as a value, we point at this title input ref. This will establish a connection and will give us access to this input element through this ref object. So here in this submit handler, we can then get the entered title, so the concrete value the user entered, by using that title input ref, and then there actually .current, all those ref objects created with the useRef work such that they have a current property, which then holds the actual connected value. And therefore it's .current, which then holds this input element object, the JavaScript representation of that input element. And all those input elements have a value property. That's just how JavaScript works. The JavaScript object representing an input element has a value property, and that value property holds the currently entered value of that input. So that's how we can extract what the user entered. We could also change it. We could set value to some new value, but we shouldn't really do that. If you want to change what's output on the screen, use state for that instead. But for reading input, for reading values, refs can be a very useful tool. And here we are reading what the user entered. Now we can repeat that for the other inputs, simply by creating more refs. You can have more than one ref per component. So here I also create the image input ref like this, and I'll already copy that a couple of times, and also create the address input ref and the description input ref. And then we connect those refs with the ref property here on the image. We connect this to image input ref. For the address, we connect this to address input ref. And on the text area, which is there to enter a description, we connect the description input ref. Now with that, we can extract all those entered values in the submit handler. So we get the entered image with image input ref .current.value. We got the entered address with the address input ref .current.value. And we got the entered description by using the description input ref current.value. And that then allows us to create a new object, let's say, the meetup data object, which then has a couple of keys, like let's say title, and stores those entered values as values. So the entered title for the title key. For the image key, I store the entered image. For the address key, let's say, we store the entered address. And for the description key, we store the entered description. And now for the moment, I'll simply log that meetup data with console log. Soon we will send it to a server instead. But for the moment, let's just see if that works. And hence, if I now go back and open up the DevTools here and reload, we can enter something here like a test, and then here's some URL. Let me just grab that dummy image URL from my dummy meetup data in the all meetups.js file and insert that here without quotes. Some test address 12345 test city, and then this is a test. And if we now click add meetup, we see this object here on the right, which is the object with all the entered data. So submitting the form and handling the submission, preventing the browser default, and gathering all the user input, all of that works now. And that is how we can handle forms with React. Now, of course, the goal is not to just log the data here, though. Instead, we now want to send it to a server, which then stores it in a database.